So this is consider this as preparation stage for my 5-step setup. Now you might be thinking, why am I talking about 5-step setup? It was partly because 10 years ago I wrote an ebook which is still out there and sells occasionally, but I don't do any promotion, so it's out there and it's valid, and it still shows how to do great Reloved Guitar setup. But I'm actually in the process of building my own AI, let's call it an AI, not assistant, but coaching kind of app to take you through all of the details and the nuances and the building up of experience that it takes to get good at setting guitars up in the way that I do it. And you might say, what way is that? And that's the way where we level frets with the strings on and the neck under load. So I'm looking to make this new, look at my old amp, looking to make this new app. Anyway, so I'm having fun learning the AI aspect and how to make one. But it's also pressing me or pushing me to think of how I structure my videos or how I structure setting up guitars or the way I talk about it. And one of the things I've realized is that there are 2 stages at which I would assess a guitar. And the first part would be when it comes into me straight away. So obviously I'm going to, particularly if it's been sent in to me, the first level of assessment is going to be, is it in one piece? Has it survived the transportation? And 99.6% of the time it does. Very rarely does it get destroyed, and that's partly because my customers love their guitars and they take great care in packing them, but also because I send customers my notes, extensive notes to how to package in a way that will survive the British courier postal system. Anyway, so we assess it when it comes in. You know, first of all, has it been damaged? Is it in good shape? Has it survived the transportation? And this one was brought to me by a local customer, so that doesn't really count. But we certainly assess it from that perspective, from the transportation perspective. If there is damage, the first thing I would do is tell the customer who sent the guitar to me, and I'll be able to help them understand whether the damage was from a courier ill treatment, or actually quite often from bad packaging, and even occasionally damage that exists in the guitar almost certainly before it was put into packaging and sent. And so I can often help give my customer an idea about whether they've got a case against the courier or against the seller. But I'm saying this like it's something that happens regularly. It certainly doesn't. I can only think of, perhaps in the recent 4 or 5 years, one guitar that was bought by my customer from a seller in Italy, and the Italian seller packaged it really badly and it came damaged. The customer, I think, got a small refund from the seller in Italy, and I went ahead and modified the guitar and did the work on it that he wanted me to do. There's a fly in here now. Anyway, so after initial assessment, also for my own sake, what I do is assess what is on the guitar. So, you know, this has been hand carried over to me by Pete, who lives relatively locally to me. And, you know, we've talked it through, looked at it, and there are clearly some dings and damage to the guitar all round. It's not in a new condition. It's been played, but it's good old-fashioned, honest play wear. And it's a mixture of dings, dimples, and kind of presses into the finish here on the back of the neck, and then some fairly substantial wax onto the finish here, which is a sort of faded. I can't remember what is it a Laguna blue? I'm not sure if that's a Fender car, but anyway, a faded blue and a sort of a green thing, mint green scratch plate. So it's almost one color guitar. It's very nice. Anyway, we've even if we don't go through it, let's say I get it from a customer who sent it by courier, then I will check all the play wear and make sure I know where everything is. And if you really have any problems with that kind of thing, I don't tend to have a problem, but if you were to have any problem with customer saying you did any damage, or if that's something that happens in your area, maybe, then take some time with your phone. You've got a device there always capable of taking pictures, and take pictures and videos. It might only take you 3-4 minutes just to cover everything, so you've got yourself covered. You know what's damaged and what isn't. In the very, very rare event that somebody would say that you've done something, you've then got a way out of it, and it won't cost you anything. You can delete the picture straight after. I've done that a few times, but I've never really been caught out without doing it. So, okay, so once I've got the, is it damaged, what damage was originally on the guitar, can I protect myself with a record of the damage, either talking it through with the customer or taking a photographic record. And then we're into the assessment part of it. And for that, what we're looking at is, how does it feel to play? Now, I'm not a great player, as many of you will know. That is not my forte. I love to play with people and, you know, knock about at home, but I'm not a great player, so don't expect that. And this is the last we'll talk about it. So what I'm going to do here is just make noises so that we see what plays, what doesn't, and I'll get a feel of how high the action is at both ends and what the state of the neck is and so on. So as I'm doing it, I'm feeling where these dents and dimples are in the finish, and some of them I'm going to have a little go at later on in this part of it, in this video, and I'm going to look at lightly steaming these on the edge here, see whether I can just get the wood to expand out, and so we don't feel them so much. Now, Pete said that it didn't really bother him particularly, but I'm always keen to see if we can take the ones away that are right in your sensitive hand zone. So we've got a Baja Telecaster, classic vibe. Oh my goodness. Anyway, a Fender Mexico Baja. Very nice guitar. It's got a 4-way switch with an S1 switch in the in the volume control. Now it has a bit of crackling, I'm told, which we'll see if we can take a look at that as well. So that will be something else on the fixing. See if we can steam out the dents in the finishing. Second fixing item later on will be, see if we can just give these a good squirt with that stuff. Contact cleaner of solvent, IPA solvent, and we'll get them cleaned up and make sure we can play them without crackle. But right now, my interest is in how does it play, and does everything work on it. So we have a 4-way switch, which gives us in this position, in the number 1 position, gives us bridge only. Then we've got what might be a middle position on a normal 3-way switch Telecaster, which gives us these two in parallel. The crackle there. Okay, so and now this is where the S1 switch comes in, because the S1 switch will turn that sound, turn these pickups from being in phase with each other to out of phase. That's what they say. That's interesting. I just watched somebody talking about this. This is supposed to be neck pickup only. And the S1 switch here is definitely doing something more than out of phase. Well, it's not doing out of phase because you can't have out of phase on a single pickup. So this position here, number 3, has got the neck pickup engaged, and there's clearly maybe it's just making a noise like it's trying to change. So it may be making an electrical noise. Forget the in between. I don't think it's changing anything. So I think it still is phase switching, but the sound, it's interrupting the signal of the pickup, and so you're getting this on and off sound. But it's not changing the actual tone of it. All right, so now we go to this one, and in this, go back to the switch out. In the 4th position here, we have both pickups on again, and we have them in series, which kind of adds them together in a different way and makes them a bit louder and thicker. So that's comparing series with parallel. Sorry. Parallel, series. Just a little bit bigger in series, that's all. Hardly any tonal difference, but because it's using 2 pickups, then we press the S1 switch and it's out of phase, which gives you the quacky. So that switch only really makes a sound or tonal difference on the 2 pickup combinations, which is this one here. Yeah, so number 2 and number 4, and it switches them into, out of phase or into phase. So just going through all of that, I can hear that everything works. A bit of crackle. Now I'm thinking about what's happening with everything else. Is it all, is everything attached properly? Yes. Have I noticed any issues? Not exactly. Even in the first initial playthrough like this, I can do an audible, yeah, just an ear-based check on the intonation. More or less in. There's a couple of notes out there, but we won't have much intonation to do, I don't think. There's 3 sets of paired saddles, which don't have staggered intonation. So then you're either going to have one of the strings perfectly intonated and the other one not, or both of them slightly out, or the other one perfectly intonated and the other one not. So you can't. You need individual saddles, or have each of these two string saddles here need to have a little intonation, preset intonation pattern, or pre-compensated intonation pattern. You can get those barrels saddles very easily. Wilkinson makes them really inexpensively. If you change them, all you've got to do is make sure you're changing the same width, so that you don't end up with saddles that are either pushing themselves outwards because there's not enough room, or that they're moving too much because they're shorter than the previous ones. But Telecasters were played from time immemorial with non-compensated saddles like this. So, I can't. Well, I can hear it when I check the intonation, but it's not going to be such a big deal that it would stop you enjoying playing it. Okay, so that's a few things to notice. Everything else seems to work okay. Neck adjustment, the neck relief setting here is done underneath here. Truth is, they say it's designed so that you can just pull the neck out a little bit and adjust it. Well, frankly, you can do that, but it's quite a scary thing to pull this out. I tend to prefer to cap over strings here and then slacken them off and take the whole thing off, do the adjustment, put it back on, do it all up, do the strings up, and if you it's trial and error. Unless you can have the strings on right there and then when you're changing the truss rod setting, you're going to have to you'll only ever be able to do it by guesswork and try again. And when you get close, and then you'll say, right, that's good enough, and you'll leave it. Anyway, so everything's playing. Now what we do is a quick neck relief check. We'll come to the details of neck relief later in the setup, but there's a very simple way of checking it, and we effectively use the tight low E string. Mind this, we use the low E string as a tightened ruler, straight line between 2 points. So we press it down on the last fret, for example, and then we hold it down on the first fret. And what we're doing is we're making a straight edge between the first and the last fret, using the string as a straight edge. Now, if it was detuned and all floppy, it wouldn't work because it would kind of bow downwards. But because it's tight, it acts effectively as a decent ruler. So we press those down simultaneously, and then the aim is to, I never quite work out which one of these it is, but it's the 7th, probably the 7th fret is about halfway along, and we just look for the gap between the string and the 7th fret. Now there's a pretty big gap here. It's probably more than my target action or target relief. Now people say, well, what target relief do you set? And I set a particular one that I call, inverted commas, so it's quote me, a tiny bit more than none. So that means this amount here where I can see it clearly, I can judge it in my eyeball to be at least 0.25 mils of action. It's probably even higher. That's too much. What I want to do is hand crank this truss rod now so that I take that back to an action that is barely just a tiny bit more than none. So that means I can just about see it not touching the fret, and I can just about hear it when I tap it down like this. Obviously it's not very loud, but I can hear that little click, and you can too when you do it. So when it's barely there, that's a tiny bit more than none, and that's a good start point. Now you might prefer more than that later on, and you can dial that in to suit your style. What you have to remember is if you start with a tiny bit more than none guidance, it keeps you on the right side of the neck, not running any risk of the neck either being backbowed or humped like this in the middle, or if you set it too flat or dead flat, you could be close to being backbowed, and a tiny bit of change in the weather then makes it go backbowed, and you'd start to lose notes in the first half of the neck, which you don't want to do. So to avoid that, I advise, as a practical starting point that doesn't need gauges to measure, is aim for a tiny bit more than none. And basically I advise you to crank your truss rod until, first of all, there's no gap there at all, and then go a little bit in the counterclockwise relaxing direction, and then until you just open up the tiniest of gaps. If you think it's too big a gap, it's not barely off the straight line, just only the tiniest bit relieved, then flatten it again and come out of the flattened state into the relieved state, so it's just barely detectable. And that's a tiny bit more than none, a little bit more than none. And that will start as a good working start point for setting up the guitar. Now, I will go in, as we get into the setup on the bench, I will go into and adjust this, and it will mean taking the neck off and on until I've got it. But that will be fine because we'll be using the same gauge of strings again, and we know that we'll have the neck ready and set to go back into the tiniest relief curve. And we'll use that as the curve which we set as the first part of our playing action. The second part will be setting the what I call the last fret action, which is determined by the saddle heights here, and then the final of the three action components, we'll set the first fret action. Once we've done the other two, then we'll home in on that and set that to a very low 0.3 mils over the first fret. And we'll do that in the same process as changing this nut for a tusk one. So we'll make that all part of one thing. So this is my initial assessment. Now, in terms of the action, is the relief a little bit too great? Well, we've done this test. Yes, I think it is. We'll dial that back. Is the last fret action here too high? It is too high for me. I can see it already. It's more like 2.2, 2.4 mils. So we know we can lower it, and our customer wants us to lower this as well. Now, if we have some any bends that choke out, these are tens, I can't bend tens. Now with this action he's got, they don't choke out, so we've got no major problems with the uneven frets interfering with the strings at this height or this playing action, but we might find that we do once we lower it. And so we'll come, once we've done the setting of the three parts of the playing action, our preferred playing action, then we'll retest it and we'll see if we've got any chokes and buzzes creeping back in. Now we have all the notes appear to play nicely. Take the time to go through them all. I know, missed one. Now these are quite high, so I don't expect any buzzing or choking, but as we get into the wound strings, I'm always looking for what I call fret slap. So when you have a very flat neck and a low action, which makes it very easy to play, you sometimes get what's called what I call fret slap on, like that, on these lower wound strings. That's cured by the setup process. bad, but we have got a high action. The truth is, a high action will hide all manner of uneven frets. So as we go down with the action and flatter with the neck, we know that we're going the uneven frets that are there in the neck because of the way the neck behaves under load. Those unevennesses are going to come into play as we go lower, and that's what we're aiming to do in this setup, is to set the action much lower and then take away the tiny imperfections in the frets, and the position of the frets, I should say. The frets themselves haven't got any imperfections, but the way they sit is such that will interfere with the strings. Anyway, that's the initial assessment. We might call it stage 0 in my 5-step setup guide. All right, so we'll jump off this, and next time we'll be back on the bench. 21 minutes. Hello everyone, good evening, welcome to Reloved Guitars, and we're setting up a Baja Fender Telecaster made in Mexico, the one with special cool pickups and the S1 switch, which lives in there. You'll have seen in the intro that, oops, sorry, I'm just getting used to handling this plastic thing. Yeah, that switch basically sets pickups out of phase with each other. So having assessed this guitar in what I call stage 0, our sort of general assessment of it, we know that it's gonna, well, our customer wants the action lowered and he wants it set up and the frets leveled so that you can have it at the lowest possible good playable action. And that's what we intend to do with it, and within that we're going to level the frets using the banana method, which is why we can get a nice low flat neck radius and a nice low playing action. Now this guitar has got some dings and bumps and stuff on it, some quite, sorry about the focus, some quite big ones. You can see there, we're not going to attempt to fix those, it's just play wear. But we do have scope here for lowering the action and yeah, setting it up nicely. We're going to fit a new tusk nut on here, and we're going to fit a tusk string tree in here. We'll do the string tree a bit later, but we'll do the tusk nut fairly early on, very soon. So what we have to do to get this whole thing going is to start off by, let's zoom out a minute. Wow. We're going to start by replacing the nut. Well, let's do it in the right order. We're going to set the neck relief. We're going to replace the, set the last fret action on the saddles, and then we're going to set the first fret action in the process of changing the nut over. So the first thing we're going to get straight into is checking and setting the relief. Now I've already checked it in the assessment, and it's a little bit too much. Now we can, you can do this with the help of capos. I was writing up this process somewhere else the other day, and I said, yes, you can put one capo on the last fret. I thought, how can you? Stupid piece of advice. So what I often suggest is you capo the last fret. Blimey, I can't even get this right way around. Yeah, capo the first fret, sorry, which holds your E string against the first fret, then hold this one down at the last fret on the same string, and you've got then a straight line between those 2 points, and that allows you to see how much. Now for those who are interested, if I get a feeler gauge here, you'll probably find, I don't quite know, let's see, let's just grab something, 55 or 50, might be too much, but let's keep my 30 over there, my 50 there. Right, so I'm just looking at seeing how big this gap is at the 7th fret, and sorry, 5, 7, yeah, and it's a tiny bit over 50.5, sorry, 50, tiny bit over 0.5, so half a mil. Let's just try 45.45, I should say, just to see if we can get that in there easily. Yeah, about 0.55, so that's more than we need. My guide figure is only put on a tiny bit more than none, which is, there's a reason for that, and it's so that people will get used to, let's put this back on, people will get used to adjusting their own truss rods themselves. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slack off these strings for a minute, and so we're going to make the adjustment to dial out some of this excessive neck relief by removing, or at least slacking the neck off. Now we have to do that because this is a type of guitar with the adjuster at the truss rod, sorry, at the body end. Truss rod. The truss rod adjuster is at the body end. So I'm going to hold it here like so, and I'm going to remove the neck screws. So this adjusting, checking and setting the truss rod, or the neck relief I should say, is the first step of setting the action, the playing action as I would call it, which is done in 3 parts. So it's the neck relief first, the last fret action second, and then the first fret action third. So there is a little cutaway here that's supposedly to allow you to make the adjustment without having to take the neck off. My experience is it's really hard to do that. I don't really find that works very well. So what I'll do is I'll get a chunky adjuster, and what I really want to do is I don't want so much neck relief, so to straighten the neck out, I'm going to tighten the truss rod. Now you might think, how much did you tighten it? And the answer is, I have no idea, because you have no way of knowing when you're making this kind of adjustment on this kind of guitar with the adjuster in this position. So it's a little bit, if I can just zoom out again, and, oh no, that's zoomed right in, let's zoom right out. Hang on now, I'm going to have to try and stick you back into into place. Just bear with me, I'm so sorry. Let's try and go back there. Right, well, I'm just going to do up these now. Gently, diagonally, and then tighten the other 2 up. Okay, so this is we'll tighten it up again a bit more in a second, but this is the important thing now, is to, I don't know what you can see because I'm now, okay, you can see sort of. Right, so what I'm going to do now is to test what has what difference that adjustment has made. I'm going to now tune the guitar up again. So this is a bit of a slow process, but we don't really have any choice in the matter. Has not done that right. Start again. I'm out of touch. Okay, so now we are now tuned up to pitch, and so now what I'll do is just do the same technique to check the relief on the neck, hold down the first and the last, and we look in the central position, and what we're really aiming for is a tiny bit more than none, but I can still see this is quite a lot more than that. So let's try 0.3, see if we've lowered it any. 3, 5, 7. Yeah, it's still over 0.3. So I'm going to do it again, which I'll keep the capo on. Now you can, if you're feeling like it, you can keep the strings up to pitch, and they will obviously slack off when you take the neck off, but I find that makes it harder. You have to struggle a bit more to get the neck back in, and it's much better that the neck goes back in. The heel goes back in easily without struggling against the tightening up strings, and as these strings, we're treating them as sacrificial strings, so we're going to wear them out during the process of the setup, so it's not a problem. So again, we're going to take this off and we're going to make another adjustment. It's interesting to feel how much adjustment I made the first time there, and how much we're now going to need to make again. So it can only be a judgment call, a guesstimate. So I'm going to now do this similar adjustment. Now this is quite tight, so I'm hoping that we're going to get close to where we want to be. Okay, so again, I'll just gently tighten this in. Currently set on a 3 on this ratchet, or this torque thing, which isn't very, it's not a lot of force, so it's good enough to get it together so we can do our test. So again, we're going to tune up. So remember, we're not too worried about perfect tuning at this point, we're just worried about getting the neck under attention. Okay, we're much closer now to a tiny bit more than none, and I would say we are almost where I want it to be. So let's just call it good for now. Now, if as I'm going through this setup, I feel that we could do. Oh, I didn't get it started again. Oh lordy. Okay, we're going to have to stop again, start again. Okay, we're back with some close-up camera. We've had to rely on the overhead Sony camera. This is a new, this overhead view, Sony view. This is a newish Apple shop tripod-y thing, and it's, in a way, it's better than using the old mic stand, but not quite as secure. It's a little bit more flimsy, and actually I'm technically recording this upside down at the moment, because I'm using the back end, because I wanted some overhead ability like that, which we've got, but we can't have it, the thing doesn't do it with the phone the correct way up, so we have to have upside down settings. Somebody's having a right old snigger out there. Okay, so let's say we've done our neck relief. The next one I'm going to do is adjust down the last fret action. So the first of our 3 things, neck relief, is done. We're now going to adjust the last fret action, and I'm going to use my string gauge here, and I want 1.25 on the low, sorry, the high E, down to 1.5 on the low E. Now, having taken out a lot of the relief in the neck, this action now is closer to where we want it to be, which is pretty good. So 1.25, 1.25, 1.25, just over That's actually not bad at all. We've got that back already to close to where we want to be. Now, having lowered the action by virtue of flattening the neck out quite a lot, it does bring with it chances of choke outs, like starting to struggle a little bit. But it's not bad. Now, we're also not in tune because of changing things around. So before I do that, let's concentrate on the nut now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slack off the strings, and we're going to pay attention to the nut. So I'm going to get you, camera, close up. I mustn't just grab and pull the camera. I must use the stand itself. So I'm going to just slack off these strings using this to help me other way. Okay, so we know we've got the relief set. So now we've got the last fret action where we want it. And now we're going to pull off the strings out of the way so we can take care of the nut. Now, to help us in this, we can also use a string spread. Ow, that's just spiked me. Thank you. What was that device? I just spiked myself on my that thing when you put a thread in something. Oh, I've got the word. Anyway, so it was sticking out, and I got hit with it when I went to get these string spreader. Right, so the string spreader clears the strings out of the way a little bit, and I'm going to get my very sharp. I've only just today changed the blade, which I do regularly because they're cheap enough, the blades, and it makes sense. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to use my very sharp scalpel to just score along the bottom edge of the nut on both sides and up the sides. We want this to come away cleanly without it pulling off any finish. The nice thing, you can't see, I'm sorry, but I need to have my hands here for this. You can't, it is nice looking when it's finished over, but we don't really have an awful lot of choice if we want to remove the nut. Now, I also noticed on the edge of this fingerboard, and I'm not sure what you can see right here. Yeah, you can still see, good. On the edge of the fingerboard there is some flaking finish already, which is something we'll just keep an eye out for. And it's probably, I was going to say it might be a sort of Fender Mexico type of thing. But it's not uncommon for this poly to flake on these American and on the Mexican guitars. Simple as that. They tend to struggle sometimes with adhesion on the finish. Now, just for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get me a couple of Chinese style screwdrivers to use to tap out this nut. Now, Fenders are pretty good in that the nut is rarely over glued, so it tends to make it fairly simple to get it out. But I'm just going to have to find what we can see a minute. Yeah, just about see. Probably could do with doing that a little bit. No, that's, I don't know which thing it's using. Something like that. Right. So yes, they tend to come out without too much of a fight, which is really good. So I'm going to start by using a very small screwdriver and just basically cut through. There we go. Cut through the finish so it gets a little bite. Now this is a curved slot, which is cool because our replacement nut, we can also make a curved slot. The question is the radius. So let's just make sure we've got the right radius, that it's a 9.5. So to do that, oh, you can still see this. I'm just going to check the radius here, 9.5. Yep, that's good. So our nut is the right radius to begin with, and it looketh like this. So we'll take this out. What we have to do with this nut, as I'll show you up close using this, with this nut, it comes with obviously a curve on the bottom, but to allow you to use it on a flat base, it has this little foot ready built in. We need to take that off with a spinning Dremel drum or something. It's probably the quickest thing to get it off with. Let me just move a few things out of the way so we're not tools, I'm not in the way of anything. Thank you. Let me put this down. Don't push the phone, Sam. Don't push the phone. Just use the stand. Remind yourself. Now, I am short of a Dremel. We need a new Dremel, but I've got one here. But conveniently, it's the old one with the long-winded thing, and it's already plugged in, which is good. And I think we'll probably fire up now. No, it won't. Maybe it will now. Aha. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this to very carefully take off the little central foot, which if we left it on, it would get in the way of the curved radius. Now the important thing about this is that we need to take this little lump off, and it almost doesn't matter if we go a bit too far. It matters more if we don't go far enough. A tiny little overcut will still allow the nut to sit in the right place. If it's undercut, it'll have it'll rock on this sort of little this little bit of foot that's still remaining. Okay, so that's good. If we take the original one, we'll just check the thickness of it against the new one, and we see what we have to do to adjust it. So we have 3.15 here, and we have probably 3.2 here. Oh, 3.156, 3.18. So it's almost going to be the right size for, let's try and, wrong thing. Let's get used to adjusting this. Now that is not in focus, that is. So we should find that this one almost perfectly fits in, but we're going to take the tiniest bit off it because we want it to drop in. We don't want to have to push it in. So it's just a very, very fine thing. So I've got a pretty mucky old bit of, you can't see it, but a mucky old bit of sanding 240 grit, and I'm just going to use that to work our way down to a nice snug fit, very, very carefully. So I'm sanding the flat face, the face facing away from the tuners, I should say. So I'm just going to keep on working that thickness down a little tiny bit so that we can get this to drop in. Now, once we've got that, we may find that this tusk replacement nut, whilst being the right radius and the right spacing, we may find that it's a bit long, and we may have to take a little tiny bit off the end. So it's a tiny bit too wide at the treble end. So I'm just going to carry on sanding that with a little bit of additional pressure up there on a very, very mild piece of sandpaper. I have to say this thing's pretty worn out. So it's not quite, oh yeah, it's pretty tight actually. Let's see if it drops all the way in and sits there. Yeah. What I might just do as well is I may just do a little bit of sanding on the underside of this here, just to make sure that we haven't got anything sticking up, getting in the way, to make sure it doesn't rock. If you do have a little bit of the foot remaining, it potentially rocks over that. It forms a pivot, and you won't get both sides down at the same time because of the way it's pivoting. So I'm getting close, still a little bit tight at that end. I'll do a little bit more. How much sanding you do depends on the bit of material you're using to do the sanding. I know this is pretty worn out 240 grit, and also it helps to have, you know, a lot of experience of sanding and knowing when you're at the right spot. Okay, so we're just a tiny bit over length here, and we'll probably take it off looking at this on the bass side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the original, which is now gone for a little walk. Okay, where have you gone? Not funny. I've now managed to make it disappear. How can you do that? How? Look at this. Where is it? There it is. Messy table, bad camera work. Right. What was I looking at? Oh yes, I can tell the exact length of this. So I'm just going to scrape off the little bit of finish on this end of the other one. Okay, and then we'll measure it, and we've got exactly 42.4. So I can lock off my thingy at that, and we've now got, yeah, we're a bit over. So we're going to take it off the bass side. So 42.4, I'm going to run out of sight over to a little small sanding wheel. Check again on the length. Absolutely just about spot on, just in one go, which is pretty good. So I'm going to then just round off the edge that I've just, or the place I've just sanded, so it's nice and rounded, and then I'm going to round off as it comes over the edge of the nut so it doesn't feel sharp, and just round off the sharp little point bit right on the edge too. So there we are, we're kind of down to the correct width, and putting it in there, it will sit beautifully. Now, let's pull this up if we can still. We've got a little bit sticking up there. I think we do, right. So what we don't yet know is whether this is the correct height for the strings. So we're going to put this in its place, line it up, and press it down so it's nice and firmly in place. We'll check the gaps either side, make sure it's seated. That's good on that side, and it's pretty close on that side. And then what we can do is we can put on the strings. Now before I put the strings back on, he said try and zoom out, don't move the camera by pulling the camera, move it by pulling the tripod. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark up the frets. So this is just jumping ahead a little bit to the fret leveling stage. Since we're going to do it, and the strings are now currently floppy and out of the way, I might as well take the advantage of that and just mark up these frets with a black marker pen. Now I could have left this until that actual stage, which comes in a minute, but I'm just taking advantage of the fact that the strings are off in order to get the nut finessed to the right size and more importantly, the right first fret action. But I couldn't resist since the strings were off. Now we can sort of tighten up in the center, and we can tighten up with a G. So put the D on first, and it's holding down the center. I'm going to use this power thing to speed this up a little bit. Now we're going to go down with the G, and then we're going to go down with the B. Now it's a little bit high at the moment, so we have an option here with this. Let's get this back on. When we do this, we have an option how we get to the correct first fret action, and sometimes when we come to do a Fender guitar like this, believe it or not, the replacement nut fits in at exactly the correct, what the word would be, correct height. Now this is slightly, it looks like we could do with realigning the neck a little bit. We'll come to that in a second. Remind me of that, won't you? So what we've got right now is we're just really concentrating on the first fret action. So with our new nut in place, you can see that the first fret action is got higher. Now we can reduce that one of two ways. Let me try and get you back into gear here. Long shot. Okay, so there's two ways of adjusting this. The simpler of the two ways is to cut down into the saddle slots and lower the slots. I always like to try and keep the original factory slots untouched. So if we were going to try and do that, what I would do is slack this off again. Oh no, first of all I'd measure how much over we are on both sides. So I'd need my gauges here. So we are at over 3.3. So this is a bit fiddly. Now what I'm going to do to help me with this is I'm going to draw out what measurements I find so that we've got something to work to. So we're going to write down, we're going to go low E, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, E, B, G, D, A, E, and we're going to mark down the first fret action on all of those. It currently is. So we're going to have to pull a few little bits of this, what do you call it, feeler gauges out. It's too much. Oh, sorry, not enough. That's, the gap's too big. So we've got 3 and 4, 5, so that's 0.75. That's 0.75. It's still playing, so that's we are 0.75. Let's put a 0.1 on there, and we'll make it 0.85 altogether. It's a little bit difficult to manipulate the thin ones. Okay, so we've got it at 0.75. So I'm going to write down 0.75 on the low E. 0.75 on the low E. And let's check on the high E. Let's take the skinny one out of the way. Let's see what the high E is doing. So we've got 0.75 again already set on the high E. Let's try it. .75 exactly. Okay, so I don't really need to measure the in-betweeny ones because if there's any tiny difference at all, we'll make the tiniest of amendments with the files. But what we know now is we're basically 0.45 on both sides over what we want. So this is where it gets interesting. If we now slack this off, and we're going to use a tool that a Reloved Guitars viewer sent me ages ago that he was prototyping to try out, and it comes in handy at times like this. So we have our little nut there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw, don't pull the phone, Sam, I'm so bad at this. I'm going to draw our little nut here. How am I going to do it? I'm going to draw it like this. Here it is. Like that. Now I'm going to take a measurement there in the 2 high E slots, and what I'm going to do is write down what that is. So I use my thing. I'm doing it on the front edge. So on the bass side, it's giving me, it goes, the caliper goes into the slot, and it says 347, 3.47, and on the treble side it won't go into the slot, so it will read higher, but that's okay. And we go 395. Okay, we've got a minus 0.45 on that one, and we've got a minus 0.45 on that one. And so that one should come down to, let's just be simple and call it 3.00 is our target. And this one goes down to 3.5 exactly. So that gives us a target for any adjustments we make. And this is where it gets interesting. So if I point you down at the bench a minute, and I'm going to go and find my 9.5 radius thingy, which I found, and then I'm going to find my other 9.5 inch radius thingy. So I'm going to find the hex key that works. Right, so this is interesting, this little device here. You have to stick your own sandpaper to it, which I have done. I can't remember the last time I changed it, but I don't use it very often because not often I have to radius down new nuts from underneath. They usually tend to either fit very well or end up with a what's the word, a flat one, and I can do that much easier. So what we do is we go in here and put this one into here. Now it's already pretty set, but what I want to do is, while I'm doing this, I really want to put the other one in the other side, so that I don't have this thing pulling just in one point here. Now this maybe it could have been an improvement that the original maker could have put on it, but it's okay. I'm sort of compromising. So I'm setting this proud of the surface, and then I'm going to tighten up. I don't know if well you can see that. I'm tightening up on both sides now. So now I have my 9.5 inch nut in place there. It's probably, if anything, it's got a tiny bit higher setting on here, which I could probably, maybe you could tap down, I don't know. I think that's about right. And I've got the other one there just to space out that side, so we're pulling equally rather than causing it to fall over. Now this is the interesting bit. We get this thing here, and let's zoom you in. So what we get it now, it's designed, I guess, so that you can run it along like this. But again, problem is there is a lot of movement you can make. So one of the things I found is that actually you're able to use the radius of the block and still remove material by pulling it this way. But of course you still can go that way if you're able to hold it. But if you want to square it off a little bit, you might want to then go back to doing it like so, and ensuring that you're a square. Now this is quite difficult to control, so you just have to be, hope you get lucky. And it does put quite a nice, it can put quite a nice curve onto it. It's quite accurate. What we then have to do is to slack it off, remove our nut, and of course the other one will probably fall out as well, but what the heck. Then we get our thingy again, and we check the bass side, and it's come down to 3.35. So it's gone down about 0.12, so we're heading there, okay? And on this side, so if it's gone 1.12 on that side, let's see if it's gone the same amount on the treble side. 375, it's gone 0.2, so 0.12, 0.2. So it's not exactly equal, but that is a purely, hands-on thing. It's purely by chance. I'm putting this one back to front. It doesn't matter. This one has to be in the right way. Now, if you could measure the exact distance up this was positioned, you'd be able to just run it down flush with the plastic, 3D printed plastic, but I don't think that's feasible. So it's a matter of working this now from side to side or up and down until you get where you think you've got to be. And again, it's a way of doing this without cutting into the factory slots, if you can help it. If anyone can think of a way, I mean, if you had something propping this up so it was straight and couldn't rock, you would by definition be cutting whatever it is, and you can see that occasionally it does tip over and cut anyway. So it's very difficult to actually cut any material and to do it in a way that doesn't rock. So there's a kind of, it's a difficult a difficult challenge. I don't know how the maker of this thing could have designed it in such a way to negate that or work around that. Because the challenge is you need this bottom of this nut to be square. So you're going to have to be a good sander. That's all there is to it. Okay, so you can see it's taken a little while to get to there. I'm now going to check the thing. We're on 3.2 on the bass side. Oh, actually, no, 3.15. So we're getting there. We've gone 0.3 down, and we're on this end here at 3.6. We're about, so on this one we are 0.15, and on this side we are 0.15 away. So we're pretty good on both sides. We're getting there. So we'll set it up for one more go. Like so. And who's here? There's other garages and stuff here, so the people often work late on their cars and stuff. Okay, so we're going to do a bit more brute force sanding. Like I say, completely guesswork. But then all sanding is, you're always going to be stopping and checking and hoping you've got to the right place. You can't actually know for sure. Okay, now I can see this is tipping a little bit at the back here. So what I want to do is I'm trying to find a way to do this without it rocking. So I'm going to do it vertically. You can't see it now because I'm trying to use it now to square up the bottom a bit more accurately. So this is a method of squaring it off a little bit, change the orientation. I think that seems to work, and come at it from a different angle. Okay, so here's our thing. This one, it's coming in at 3.1, still a little high. It's the right shape and everything, so we'll carry on a little bit. It's all about, keeping at it. It'd be nice, in the ultimate attempt, or the ultimate aim, will be to get the strings sitting at close to, or very close to, the correct first fret action without needing to do any slot cutting. Now this is very, very fine tuning. I mean, it's the chances of being able to sand it to perfection from here are quite slim, really, if I'm honest. But let's see if I can push that in a little bit further down. Come on. Yeah, maybe. No. Whoops. Come on, down a bit, up a bit. That'll do. Yeah, so it's quite difficult. But as you can see, we're doing a couple of different techniques to get there. So we're going to go side to side to remove as much as we can, trying to keep it flat. When I think we've probably got down near the height we want to be at, we do need to just concentrate on a little bit of up and down, keeping it as square or perpendicular on the bottom as possible. I think that's probably going to be our best shot. So let's see what it actually turns into when we get the things on, and that's obviously the wrong way. Oh, okay. So put this on, hold it down, press it in. Okay, so this is a lot of time and effort now, you can see, being spent on the nut part on its own. So we're making sure that everything is seated. Now, is that caught in the middle? Yeah, there's a little, what feels like a tiny discrepancy in the shape of this, which I think is quite difficult to know if there is or if there isn't. And we can't really tell. We've taken a lot off there. This should be the correct radius, but it's working off a 3D printed thing, so it may be in a situation where we've taken a tiny bit more. No, we've got a slightly different radius thanks to the use of that tool. So I'm just going to take a little bit more off the center of this here in case we were in danger of running a slightly proud spot and getting a little pivot going there, which we don't want to be. So as you can imagine, everything that I pick up that has a radius attached to it could well be a slightly different radius from everything else. So obviously Fender's working off a particular radius. The nut tusk is working off a radius. The filing computer 3D printed file sanding block here, that's working off somebody else's 9.5-inch radius measurement. So it's very, very difficult, and it's quite possible that they aren't all exactly the same. Somebody may have wandered off a little bit, and in which case, of course, you have a discrepancy in the radii, and then you get this slight, I don't know what the word would be, a rocking over a central pivot, if there's a difference. Those are looking pretty nice and low here. Yeah, that's looking quite good. Now, what I don't know is how well seated all that is. That's down on that side. That's pretty much down on that side. Yeah, I'm seeing a little tiny bit of I don't know what the word would be, a tiny bit of the nut sticking out, or underhang at this end. That's only a tiny bit. We could tap this one, drift it very slightly to one side. So I'm going to just look at doing that. It's very difficult to do. Bear with me. To drift a tiny bit. That's better. Yeah, it's a good fit. Right, so there we are, all at the right, at the right setting. Now, they're very nice and low. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to tune this to pitch, and then we're going to refresh where we are. Okay. Okay, I'm just looking at this, the bass side of this, and that's still coming up a fraction high. See what it is set against the 0.3. That's a tiny amount. I'll adjust that bass E, the low E, I think. Let's just check. They're pretty good. I mean, if necessary, take them out and do a little bit more, but yeah, they're just a tiny bit higher than 0.3. But the problem with this is if I carry on doing it from below, we may overcut it. Yeah, let's do a tiny bit more, but we've got to remember that we need a bit more off the bass end. This adds a little extra little dimension to our work. So you can see it's going to be a little bit more fiddly again. Terrible camera work. So this is all in service of not using the files I guess I'm making them out to be something terrible to use, but really they're not. You know, I use files all the time to get exactly the first fret action that I want, but I've done it again. The original nut has gone for a walk. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm being very, very, very particular, but I guess I'm just trying to prove to myself that it can be done. So on this time round, I'm going to stick my original one in that side, and now on this side, I'm going to set it with the bass side sticking up a little bit and practically nothing at all showing on the treble side. So we're going to take stuff only from the bass side, like so. Yep, that's about right. We shall see. Theoretically, it should work. Back to our block here, which you can see, long shot now. So now we're working on the bass side, which is still a bit too high. Okay, so we're gonna start by side to side sanding to remove more material on the bass side than anywhere else. And then I'm going to try and make sure, or just double check that it's perpendicular, which it looks pretty good for almost by chance. Sand that clean. There we go. Right, I think we'll go with that. And if it's not absolutely perfect, then I will adjust it with the files. But it's a pretty good go at it. All right, last time. In you go. Line up properly. Line up a bit further that way. Good, with perfect. All right, now I'm keeping an eye out that handling all of this has moved some of the black marker pen off the frets, but still enough there to do our leveling job and to gauge what's happening with the leveling, so that's okay. So I'm just going to tighten these up now. Start with the middle ones. Keep the nut pin down. Oops, this one's come off. Keep the nut pin down. And this one's come off. Go back on, please. Thank you. Okay, now I think this is pretty much right, spot on. So I'm just giving everything a little pull just to bed the strings in before I tune them one time before we do the fret leveling. Lovely. Everything is where I want it. So, after what seems like an extraordinary long amount of time, we are 3 parts of our our playing action are set. First of all, the neck relief, we've set it. Secondly, last fret action, we've set it via the bridge. Finally, last of the 3, we've set the first fret action in the process of installing a new tusk nut for tuning stability purposes as much as anything. So we are now ready to do the fret leveling part of the operation, which is a very interesting process, I promise you. So we use our famous banana fret leveling beam. It's U-channel truss rod, converted, modified for the purpose, and we use some little tools, accessories to help us do it. So here we are now. If you like, this is step 2, precision fret leveling, or module 2 you might call it. And so what we do is tune to pitch. We now calibrate our banana tool for what I call the E track, which is the space occupied by the E string, high E string I should say. And we do this by placing the banana tool down on the left hand side. These are spaced equally, and they're kind of equidistant down the length of this banana. So we touch down the banana on the first one, and then we bring it down onto the other two and note which it hits first. Now in this case it's hitting the middle one first, which means the banana is too curved. So we're going to dial that out by counterclockwise adjustment of the adjuster, which has now come loose. So it's probably going to be at its most basic setting that this is calibrated, and so it happens to be. That's now calibrated. It's because it's touching down on these two simultaneously. It's always on touching this one because I pivot it off that one, touching down on the other two at the same point. That means the curve here is matched to the curve in the neck. And so we then take the little brass monkeys off, put the string off to one side, and we use a spacer down here to put the string out the way. And then we get our banana tool and we place it on the frets, and we gently move backwards and forwards about an inch each way, end to end, and a little bit sideways. So we've got about an area of about 8 millimeters across the radius, and about an inch, 2.5 centimeters either side. Actually it's more like 2 centimeters backwards and forwards. So not much movement in any direction, and then we do a bit more movement, and then we stop. And that's a diagnostic, I call it a diagnostic leveling pass. So the first thing we look at, I don't know how well this light is going to show us how it works, but let's try. Hold on. Okay, so what I then do, and this is the kind of your diagnostic look, we go down here and we go first fret. We go, focus in please. So cutting a little bit, cutting a little bit, cutting not much, that's a little bit lower, cutting quite well, not cutting so much, not cutting too much, but a bit. There's a few little black bits there. Cutting, 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 not cutting so much, not cutting hardly at all, right on the edge, not, cutting, cutting well, cutting well, cutting well, cutting well. So what this shows us is that area there is a valley coming upwards to a sort of hill, but it's not necessarily a peaked hill, but it's if you imagine it as a curvy sets of hills and valleys, we've got high, a little dip there, back up, a little dip in these two frets here, back up, then it goes down the side of a deep trough or valley, and then comes back up to the hills. So straight away that gives us an interesting idea about the topography of this particular neck. But it's not just about the neck, it's about the neck under compression, and that's the really important thing about this, why this method works so well, and it's different from any other method. We're leveling the frets in the exact position they are when you have the guitar strung up at full playing pitch. Now we know that the notes all played pretty well before, which is fine. We now have an idea that there are some low spots here which may contribute to why there's a little zzz on those notes, and that absolutely it ties in perfectly with what we're seeing. We're seeing a low, if we have a low ditch or a valley, notes fretted and bent in a valley will choke out on the when the string comes across into the other tracks, so the B and particularly the G track, and it tends to be the G where it bends out. So I'm pretty happy with where that is and what it tells us about the things at the moment. I might just do another, I typically recommend doing a diagnostic pass on each track and then another leveling pass. So here we go, and we're doing kind of the second pass, the leveling pass. And what it's going to tell me is how quickly things change. Will tell me the nature of the valleys and the hills that I'm looking at. So there's my second little pass, and we're pretty much just getting into near the bottom of this valley here. So I would say 12, 13, 14, fret 14 and 15 are the weakest, are going to be the weakest ones and the most likely to choke out, creating that zizzing sound. But we're addressing it, which is absolutely fine. Now we're going to use the same calibration to do the B track. And so what I do is I move the B string out of the way, spread the B from the G, and then we've got space to work into the G track now. So again, the first one, diagnostic in that I'm expecting it to tell me very much, well, probably very much the same as the diagnostic pass in the high E track, and it does. It shows me we've got a low spot here, but everything else is kind of registering very much the same as we found in the E. In fact, some of the low spots over here are improved as we get into the B track, which is good. So again, we can do a quick play check of every single note. Now on this guitar, they're all going to play because they did before, but often on older or less well set up guitars, you might find you're playing these notes now to check that you've freed up a particularly sticky fret that was high, because sometimes you will get high frets. They're not as common as we all think. What we tend to find is we've got high hills and low valleys. That's the source of most of our problems. Now, I know I've got a flat spot here up here, so I'm going to just kind of concentrate on a little bit more leveling and hope that we can bring the extremes where we have the ditch, not flat spot, the ditch, if you like. We're going to bring down some of the hills either side of the ditch, so we bottom out and reduce the overall difference between the bottom of the ditch or the valley and the peak of the hill. Now we're going to recalibrate now for the G track, and the G track is often the critical one where any zizzings and chokes will get sorted out. So we do the calibration here, put it down, and now we've got a little bit not enough bend. So I'm just going to dial in a tiny bit of tension into the banana, and that's now that's immediately corrected the opposite way. So it's very, very sensitive. So I'm going to go back infinitesimal amount the other way, and an infinitesimal amount more, and just I want them to touch down. Now you could probably guess from this that there are times where if I needed to create an extra bit of scooping out in the middle of a neck, let's say where a truss rod won't adjust far enough, I can actually over bend this and dig a little tiny bit of relief into the overall fretboard profile. So you can use it to get out of a couple of little sticky problems where you may find that it's not uncommon that you have a neck where the truss rod won't adjust and you can't afford the cost or the time to pull off the fingerboard, put a new truss rod in, or do all the other kinds of things. So in that case, the banana file has this ability to overcut, if necessary, to force. See, look, what was that? I said 14. 14 squelching because it's low, and it's the next set of high ones are getting in the way. We're up the hill there, that's okay. Yes, it's a pretty effective little tool. Now I'm going to do the second of two passes now in the G track, and I'm going to sort of concentrate on bringing those discrepancies together, the bottom of the valley and the peak of the hill, and that's what we're always aiming to do. And what you'll learn over years of using this is that the frets that are low, as in when the neck is under load, the strings are on in this exact configuration, the frets that are low in the valleys, which stay the same because the neck goes into the shape when it's loaded, the frets in the valleys are the ones that dictate the loudness of the action you can set. So better, tiny bit of zizz, none there now, tiny bit. Now I can see where that's zizzing. I can hold the plectrum, and it's in the G track, which I kind of expect. So I'm going to do a tiny bit more at that point in the G track to see if we can just free up that little tiny bit of zizzing. It's very high, we're pushing it a lot to do it. Other ways, if you can't make that improvement with leveling bin, what you can do is you can just raise the action by the tiniest amount. Sometimes we have to compromise, and that's a fact. Okay, I'm going to leave that there because I already know that's pretty good. So I'm now going to calibrate for the D string. And as we go into this mode, we're now thinking about the wound strings, which move more than, describe a bigger shape as they move around. Why is this? No, this needs to be there. They spin more than the plain thinner strings. So because of that, they tend to clatter and hit the hills in the overall fretboard topography, and that's what causes what I call fret slap, and it's a kind of clattering sound that you find accompanies the fretted notes all the way up that wound string. So I'm just looking at my timing. I'm going to need to check the battery in a minute. We've got, on this new phone, we've got enough memory, but battery is going to be always the constraint, even with a new phone. So here's my first run with the leveling tool, and I'm looking at what it tells me, and it's confirming that we're still got a little bit of lowness there, but overall it should be fine. And I'm really now concentrating only on minimizing the fret slap, because I know all the strings play. I want to make sure there's no slap. So that's 2 passes on the D track. Nice. So there's a little bit of slap up there on the A, so I'm going to calibrate for the A, and we'll get straight into that, and then onto the E, and we'll then be ready to recrown the frets that we've leveled, and once we've recrowned them, we'll be ready to sand and polish them out. And that's a noisy, messy process, which I'll probably do off camera to give myself a chance to recharge the camera, make sure it's charged enough for the last bits, which will include a little bit of the fixing, a little bit of steaming some dings in the neck, and a little bit of spraying some contact cleaner into the pots. So I'm going by experience. You'd be amazed, as long as you practice before you get onto an expensive guitar or guitars that you really care about, you'll have no trouble. This is years of knowing when to stop leveling, or put another way, when is it too much. Perfect. Right, calibrate for the low E, and then we're good to finish the leveling. So a lot of experience does help, but it helps to make the judgment call about when you're calibrated properly, about when you may have gone wrong if you've not been thinking straight, and when you need to stop and rethink, or most often when have I reached the optimum amount of fret metal to take in return for the playing action that I'm after. and how do you assess whether the frets are capable of you taking that material and when they're not. So looking at this, there's still a little low spot there, but I think we should be all right. It's usually rattles when the low spot's here and it comes into contact with the frets there. But the low bit on here is very close to the end. So, lovely, beautifully out of tune. I'm very happy with that. That's all good. So my 3 bits go in there, my hex key goes in there, my string spacer goes in there, and my kit gets put away just like another day. Magnetically stuck up on the wall. Beautiful. Now what do we do next? We take all these off. But before we do, let's take off these outside ones. Now, no, do you know what? I'm not going to glue this nut in. It doesn't need it. It hasn't moved since I've been playing and testing. So if we can get away without gluing it, the better. It's better that we don't. Okay. Okay. So we have completed step 2, the precision fret leveling. Now we have a neck that is basically ready to play, and every time we tighten it up to pitch with the same gauge strings, it'll go exactly back into the configuration it was in before, and for which these frets are now perfectly leveled. Okay, so we're now on into module 3 or step 3, which is recrowning the frets, sanding them and polishing them out. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark them up again, ready for recrowning. Now, excuse me. I'm going to do a little bit of this. I won't do all of them on camera, and then we'll put the camera on charge. So we'll kind of stop, and some of module 3, as in the sanding and polishing, should it be in off camera? No, it shouldn't be. If I'm being totally thorough, I should show it to you. Tell you what, let me stop now. I've got another layer, another coat to spray on another guitar. We'll come back in a minute when I've charged up, and we'll get straight into recrowning, sanding and polishing. Okay, now I didn't charge hardly at all, so hopefully we're going to get there on this charge. So you can see I've remarked all the leveled frets, and so we're into the recrowning process. So the recrowning process, to put it very simply, is when we level a fret, which looks like that, to level it we take some material off the top, and then of course we're left with a slightly flat fret. That's not ideal. It's natural because we've taken some material down, but what we really want to do is to somehow be able to make the fret look like that again, turn it back into a nice arch, and the reason for that is that it keeps the intonation point of the fret right in the center, and it makes the playing experience much smoother, because the smaller the point of contact the better. If you try and play on the flattened fret, the intonation point moves forward bridge side to the bridge side of the flat spot, and it does affect the intonation very slightly. Probably not so much that most of us would notice, but it really does affect it. But most importantly of all, it's playing on a flat spot is a scratchy and sharp experience. So the recrowning process is that we're aiming to recrown the fret so that we wear away these this part of the fret here. We take it away so that we're left with that new shape that's like the old shape, only overall a bit lower than it started out, and that's the recrowning part of it. And to do that we use a concave file that follows the shape of the fret like that, and we bring it down, and it takes away these sharp edges here first, and we stop before the inside of the file touches the top of the fret. And if we can preserve a thin line of metal down the center of the fret, then we can be sure that we haven't affected its levelness, that we've spent quite a bit of time already making sure we've got relative to all the other ones. And the way we do that is by looking down on these. This is where I can get a better view. Looking down on these, you can see, you'll well be able to see, I promise you. Oh, this can stand up a bit higher. Forgot that. Yeah, so looking down on these, this is wobbly now. Looking down on this, I'll get my fret file, my Stumac one. Now, I'll get my brush so I can clean the file as we go, and I'll put it on the medium size of things. And so what we do is we bring the file onto here like so, and we roll it across the fret, and you may just be able to see there it's starting to cut the edges of the flat spot, and so they turn silvery first, and as we go across a bit more, that cut comes inwards. Let's see if we can zoom in a bit more, and eventually you'll see a black line, a thin black line of whatever that stuff is, marker pen, left down the middle of the fret. Some parts of the fret you may have to do a little bit more leveling than others, like that, just to make sure we get it all re-crowned properly. And I would then probably stop at that point and move on to the next one. Okay, so that's a quick look at it. I'll carry on filming from over here if I can just make this Duran thing work. Get just a slightly different angle on it. There you go. In fact, I'm going to put that down like so, and I'm just going to keep going, and I will along the way just clean my file. So on we go. And what I keep finding is, or I always find, is that the amount of leveling I have to do tells me, the amount of recrowning I have to do tells me how much leveling has been done. Now often it's how much leveling I've done, but very often it's how much leveling either a previous technician has done, and sometimes it's quite extreme. And this has got some quite flat, fairly flat spots on it. So somebody else has either leveled it before, or it's played smooth, or it's worn down through a lot of play. So it's difficult to know exactly which it is without knowing the full history of this. But I can see when I first looked at the frets that they had some quite flat spots on them. Now, that's the big judgment call you have to make when you look at a set of frets, is whether the frets will withstand this leveling process, because if they're too low, I sometimes would advise a customer not to invest in such a precise setup in pursuit of a very low action if the frets are already well past their day. It would be better to not to put that money into it. And or in some cases, if it's a really much loved guitar, consider refretting it, because in a full refret price I always include the full setup as well, including the precision fret leveling, which is amazing that a lot of people will refret guitars and they send the refretted guitar, or they'll do a standard leveling on the refretted on the new frets, but they don't benefit from this this method of being able to level them when they're under compression, when the neck is under compression and the frets are in different positions from when the strings are off and the neck is set flat, which is the way most people level frets. So it's quite a big difference in how, in the effect it produces. I've always said that leveling your frets in the old-fashioned method is a million times better than not leveling them at all. But it absolutely doesn't take into account this business of compression, which is probably the single most important piece of information I've learned in the 10, 12 years, or maybe 12 years now, I've been doing this. So that's why I do what I do, and that's why I charge what I charge, because it's a more accurate method than the standard method. And it's logical. When people understand it and get their heads around it, it suddenly strikes them as completely common sense, logical, which is great, you know. But I didn't know about it until I saw it, and then, you know, my instincts were, no, you can't. How can you level frets when you've got some degree of curvature in the neck? And it seemed counterintuitive. And then I figured it out, and I spent 10 years enjoying the results, but also, you know, perfecting the fine tuning of it, I suppose you could say. So there's the recrowning done. As you can see, there's dust, a fair amount of dust kicked up from that, which we can sort of boot off out of the way. So the next part is another section of quite grueling stuff, which doesn't make for great viewing, but it's necessary to do. Now, this one always has me slightly nervous because Fender, the poly on the edge of this is cracking in places as a sort of by default. So I always have a nervousness about using masking tape to protect the fingerboard, but we have to do it. It's why we can sand and polish. Without masking off the fingerboard, we'd end up scratching it to pieces anyway. So I'm going to put on this masking tape, and I'm going to cut it back short, so only a little bit's hanging over. It's still going to touch the edge of the neck and the finish that's there, and if it pulls any off, and so be it. What we can do is reattach, well, retouch it up if you like afterwards. It's much nicer not to have to do that, but we'll cut this pretty close, and only a tiny bit of tape will be touching the edge of the fingerboard. But it is a known problem. Well, I've certainly, it is known. I and others have encountered it. American Fenders and Mexican Fenders, something about their clear poly formulation just doesn't seem to stick to the wood underneath for some reason. So it can fall off very quickly, and particularly on the maple boarded Telecasters and Strats and guitars like that from those same factories, because Fender has this habit of, or practice of, spraying their clear finish over the pressed in frets, which sort of sounds good and it's efficient and it saves them time, but what it does is it lays down the clear finish as a sort of drooping carpet that undulates over a series of obstacles, up and down, and in the up and the down, right in close to the frets, it sort of creates little air gaps which eventually start the process of splitting away, and it starts flaking before you even get to the point of needing to refret it. And particularly if you have to refret them, once you try taking the old frets out, it pulls all of the that barely clinging on poly clear finish, it pulls it all off, and so it's even worse than before. But you know, it feels terrible from a guitar tech or a luthier point of view, but it's really Fender's business. You know, they've done a really not a great job. It's more likely to come off if it's already, you know, not the stickiest finish in the world. It's even more likely to come off if you spray it over the frets, I've found. So when I'm putting frets on, I always go I finish the board first and then fret onto the finished board. And yeah, in a way that it is harder, it's more time consuming, and it means that after once you've sprayed your finish and then you start fretting, you've got to be really, really careful not to damage or scuff the material, the clear finish. So it's easy to make it look mucky. Whereas if you spray over the fret, you're kind of just about putting the guitar out of the factory door, still with a beautiful, fresh looking finish on it. So I get why it's attractive, and of course it's cheaper and quicker, but it does lead to this fret, this finish adhesion problem. What I've got is a board where I've pre-cut lots of different thicknesses of tape, so I know that I can go there to protect the what you can see here. Oh yes, so I can protect the fingerboard between the closer together frets, is what I'm trying to say, whilst I'm picking something that's stuck to the yoga mat of life here. So what I'm doing is I'm just cutting down using thinner and thinner pieces of tape until I'm right at the end and down to the thinnest pieces. And it's a bit time consuming to cut all these bits into the right size, but it's vital to do, because it means you can buy this stuff at different thicknesses, but it's kind of pricey. And whereas this kind of something like this yellow Chinese bog standard tape is cheap as chips, and if it means a few minutes before a session preparing a board full of thinner strips, then it's kind of, I'd rather do that than spend a ton of money on custom cut pre-thicknessed whatnots. So I'm just picking these bits of tape off the board, and I say a board, it's actually a tile from some kitchen shop, but I actually found it in a couple of them in the local recycling centre, and I just thought I used to do it on a piece of IKEA white finished surface, but the problem is, although the blade quite liked it, the board eventually just fell apart, and I'd be pulling it off and sticking little bits of slivers of the white melamine stuff or whatever it is, underneath this tape. So I found these tiles, and I used those, and they're great, so they never fall apart and we never get bits of tile stuck under the tape, but it blunts the blades very quickly, so you can't win one way or another. You're going to pay somewhere along the way. Right, these are not very thin strips now, and maybe didn't cut these right, so I'm going to start down here and see if I can get in between the frets with these. So this is time consuming, nothing more, nothing less. And then so is the sanding, but after 10 years of doing it like this, it seems to be a good way to do it. I haven't found a better way, and the reason you've got to go through all these different grades of paper to sand it is because in working the frets, you have to adequately remove the scratches laid down by the last tool or the last grit of paper you used. So that's quite a challenge. So if you imagine that the leveling paper is a 400 grit, and the crowning file is about 300 grit. So I go back to 400, and then I go from 400 to 600, and then to 1000, then to 1500, and so on, and then right up to micro mesh sets and up to 12,000 grit. So there's a lot of variations of grit to do, and that means you really got to protect your fingerboard from scuffing. So I'm trying to keep the overhanging tape as short as possible. Now it may mean it's going to come up and come off more quickly than it would do normally when we're sanding. But I'm trying to preserve the finish so I don't end up in having to take it home and then keep the strings off and go into a retouching the edge of the fingerboard game, which is a bit of a pain. Right, so here I have my my sandpaper directly below you, and my micro mesh, which is probably due to some new ones now. But so the next thing we do is just the boring stuff. We start with the papers, 400 grit. I got 2 pieces at each grit level, and I use it twice. So I do it one way like so, and then I turn it round and do it 90 degrees to get two sandings out of each piece. So let's see here, how do we do it? We go end to end, and it's quite imprecise, but we just make sure we do the same amount everywhere. Now it gets quite noisy, so I'm trying not to talk about anything. So here I go, and when I'm doing it, I also make sure I go over the edges of the frets, ends of the frets as well, just to keep them rounded off as possible. So sometimes the tape flips up, and we have to just make sure it stays on. If it threatens and comes right off, we'll put a new piece on. So I keep the board handy to one side. Oh, I forgot to do something. Duh. There we go. What I normally do is this. I put green tape over the last fret, or the last bit of wood, and over the single coil pickup, and then I double that up there. Then I do a piece down there to protect the finish, a piece there to protect the finish, a piece there to protect the finish, and there. So just so that in case of movement, the sandpaper doesn't hit these edges. That's all I'm bothered about. Oh, you didn't see that very well. See that? There we go. Okay, so along I go, all the way up to the end, backwards and forward, onto the edges of the frets if possible. This first paper, these first papers at 400 grit are really important, because if we don't do them enough, we'll be left with 400 grit scratches somewhere, or the traces of 400 grit scratching from the fret leveling. And that is likely to stay there until the very end, albeit it will get softened off as we go, but it'll end up being there at the end. So we've got to be pretty confident. And I found this is just about right. 2 pieces, twice with each piece, rotating the orientation of the paper as we go. Now the question is, did I do any one bit fractionally more than any other bit? And the answer is probably yes, but in a way it doesn't really matter. It's going to even out. I'm just going to stick this down again here, just because it's starting to come off one of those. That's what we'll probably end up doing. And then to the next 400 grit piece as well, I'm going to do it once that way, and then once that way as well. There, which I can just press down with that. Hopefully we'll keep it just down for the time being. Now we change to 90 degree orientation and do some more. So you can see that when you don't have it stuck down all the way or down the side, when you're being really careful to keep it away altogether, you can see that it struggles to stay down. So occasionally when a bit like this won't stay down, I may have to stick a bit further down on the side of the neck. I really don't want to do maybe a bit on that side too. Hopefully keep it to a minimum. Right, now we're to 600 and onwards. Sounds like a poem from the olden days. Into the Tele of death. Road to 600 grip. Change direction and so on. Thankfully, the remaining parts of the setup will seem quicker. Now, it's not that I don't want to be here or I resent it in any way. It's just that I've been here for about 4 hours now, preparing and stuff, and it gets standing up and doing the same thing for any length of time gets hungry making and tired making. But yeah, the next bits go quicker, usually. So that one's coming up. Come on. Stick down. Yeah, normally this doesn't come up like this, but we ain't got no say in it this time, really. Okay, other 600. Oh no, we're on to thousands now. 1,000 grit. Okay, 2 of 4 on the thousands. 3 of 4 on the thousands. It can be quite energetically tiring. Come on, you can do it. Down you go. We're on to the 1500s now. Change direction. Getting there. spin round, get clagged up. Damn it. Right, come on, 1500. Final 2 of these. And about to move on to the micro mesh pads. Right, now for the micro mesh. Every time I get to these I go, oh, I've got to buy some new ones. And so on. Thinking about it now, I think I'll leave the truss rod setting where it was. It's very close to where I would normally leave it. And quite a bit less than when we started, so that's the principal change. Okay, 3,600. Now 4,000. $6,000, then 8, then 12. Done. 8,000. And finally 12,000. Okay, those sandings and polishings are all done. We're going to end up with a load of tape now that we pull off, and just wipe off the obvious dust that's loutering about. I know what I mean. Going to take off the masking tape, and again, this occasionally will leave a tiny bit of sticky residue, which is to be expected, but when it does, we go over it with some naphtha as one of the solvents, or the solvent we'll use to clean it. So this is in the the sanding and polishing part pretty much complete, and then we're going to move in a minute into the third module, which is cleaning and fixing, and that's going to be shortish because we don't have a lot to do, but there are some general things we can cover when we come to fixing and cleaning. Let's get all these bits off first. They tend to leave a little bit of residue of the glue of this particular Chinese stuff. It's perfectly normal, but we'll clean it off. So I'm using my pad of my thumb really to roll it off wherever possible. So we shouldn't have too much of the sticky stuff down the side. Come on, you. Pull off all these rolls of yellow tape, and there we go. We have rubbish to throw away and a clean fingerboard to clean up some more. Right. Okay, so now let's go into module number 3, cleaning. Now I've got one last bit of cloth here, which is good. I need to buy some more. So for cleaning, what I'm going to do is we're going to get some naphtha, and I use this Coleman's cooking fuel, and I'm going to clean the whole of the guitar to pull up any dust from the fret sanding process. Now the thing about fret dust, I keep having to explain to, I feel like I keep having to explain to people, I probably don't, but fret dust isn't magnetic, or it's about as magnetic as anything else in the world. It's microscopically magnetic, but it won't burrow its ways into your fret wire, your pickup coils or anything like that. It sits where it falls when you're doing fret leveling, but I still typically cover the pickups anyway, just to make sure, to be on the safe side. So here I'm cleaning with naphtha, Coleman's cooking fuel. There was a time in the UK when you could easily and simply buy guitar friendly naphtha, because naphtha can be quite bizarrely can be a few different actual things in practice. It's I think a group of chemicals, very similar petrochemical type stuff. But I've had, when they stopped selling the stuff that I recognised and used regularly, there was a law that came in about selling it to the public, so you couldn't get it anymore. So I went looking at the industrial suppliers to find something identical if possible, and I got 2 or 3 different sets of 5-litre containers of stuff that claimed, after lots of research and looking at the detail at the spec sheets and so on, it claimed to be exactly totally regular naphtha. Just behave differently. They all behave differently from each other. They all acted as the same kind of solvent, and by and large, yes, they were safe on finishes, but they didn't evaporate in the same way. They had slightly different kind of some left slightly oily residues, which seemed not less than ideal. Anyway, so I eventually just ended up finding this Coleman's fuel, not very beautifully branded, but it's, with postage, it's about 10 or 12 quid per litre at maximum. It's usually a bit cheaper, but it's a dependable and usable size, and that will last me, a whole, I might go through 1.5 of those a year, something like that, maybe more. But okay, so I'm just looking at this nut seems to be slightly sticking up at this end still, but that's because it's not under any pressure. But what my concern is whether there's something in here blocking this and acting as a pivot. That's better. Okay, very good. That was a lucky thing. Now, okay, so that was our cleaning bit, basically naphtha. And if this were, you noticed I used it on the fingerboard and I used it on the poly finish, so absolutely no problems at all. I don't recommend, in this case, I'm not going to go through the whole range of possible things you might do when it comes to cleaning, or the situations you may find you have to clean up. Typically this is what I would do normally on a customer's guitar, certainly get rid of all the dust and handling marks. Now what we're also going to do on this guitar is going to move on into the fixing, small fixes thing, and I've got a couple lined up. We're going to try and steam out the dents in the neck if we can, so we'll get onto that now. See where they are, remind myself where they are. There's a couple there, 2 or 3. We're going to steam those out, or try and steam those out, see if we can do it. And then we're going to lift this up, spray the pots, and then we're going to fix the tusk string tree. So I've got myself a wet cloth that I prepared earlier, which may well have dried out by now. And it's going to be our assistant in this process. I don't really know what you can see. I think you'll be able to see what I'm doing well enough. So I'm going to hold this up while I'm doing it, and I can see the dents that kind of bother me, if at all. There's one down here, there, and there's 2 here mainly, or 4 in total. So what I do is I get my soldering iron fired up, and I basically come down to where the ding is, and I steam it with the iron over the spot that's, try and remember exactly where it is. Go over, heat and steam, finish at the spot where it's dinged. And it's reduced it a bit, but it's not made a ton of difference. It's not always the case that you can kind of ease it out. We shall see. Now, it's worth a try. Sometimes it can do it, it'll do it, and it's quite remarkable. But it may be that it's particularly good when it's a fresh ding. If this has been in it for years, the wood may well have settled, and that's your lot. No, not really, not much of an improvement. That one's funny enough working where the others weren't. It's quite difficult to find where that was now. Yeah, that's barely noticeable. Well, oh well, it's worth a go, but we can only hope. That one's improved it a little bit. Yeah, so, okay, there's a limit to what we can do. Worth a go. Always like to try. Okay, so that's that little fix attempt done. And again, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't charge for that. That's part of my service. So this one, we're going to lift up the control panel. Get the right screwdriver. And we're going to just spray the pots on the inside and then give them a bit of a rapid operation to get them loosened off. Very busy under here, so I should have done this and the other way around first. That's better. And then in here. And really, the main thing now is you want to be running it lots of times. Repeat operation is what solves the problem the majority of the time. I'm looking at this knob, and this knob's scraping a little bit as it goes round, and that's probably because it's slightly too low down on the shaft. What we can do then is to, did I take that? I think I might have taken the thing home, the wrong one home. Let's see if I can do it with this. Yeah, this is, we need to just lift it up a bit so it's not quite as far down like so. No, I see, I don't have, that's bizarre. I don't have a, 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 I don't have, this one won't fit because it's too thin. I took this one home, that's my problem, so I can only tighten it up so much. Should be enough. Okay, that's now not scraping, which is nice. Okay, so now we'll drop this back in, gently guide in all the wires that were in there before. Tighten up. So that's another little fixie type thing. I think, I'm not sure, I'm trying to think whether in module 4 I should have upgrades, or as well as fixes, cleaning fixes and small upgrades as part of the normal setup, because they're not, I don't know, they're quite often I'll end up doing something like changing a pickup, or so it might be worth including as part of a few things, and often if it's really dirty, and I might clean up the bridge or something like that. Anyway, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some lemon oil to the board. When you're doing this, you can also get a sense of the feel of the board through the paper while you're doing this, and it very quickly reveals the extent of the wear. So this guitar has been played a lot. It's got a lot of fretboard corrosion, not a ton, it's not like vintage, but it's got a fair bit of fretboard corrosion, so it's being played a lot, which is a good sign. And there we go, just a quick drink of lemon oil, and then you can just take off the surface oil with the same bit of paper. That should be fine. So, okay, so that's our, oh no, one more small fix and clean. That was part of the cleaning, you see. I must remember to put that in the right place. Now over here somewhere I've got the next little fix, which is going to be the string tree. And can I, oh I can do this, look at this, I'm really brilliant, aren't I, at moving this around? As long as I keep it where it's there. Right, so now I'm going to replace the string tree. This little metal butterfly tree is not to my liking. If you've got a tusk nut on and you're doing that because you want the best possible tuning stability, then I don't really want a metal object for the strings to scrape across. So what I'm looking to do is upgrade this to a tusk string tree. And to do that, while I'm doing that, I'll just need to, and I can't find the darn, it's always where I've lost the bit I need for this, but I shall have to make do and mend. Yeah, we're going to just slightly widen the hole and then fit a tusk one. And the tusk screw is just a tiny bit wider. Now I don't have a wider gauge drill bit at the moment, so that's being a bit on the annoying side. I can't speak no more. I had a quick look through my unsorted box of bits and see which ones would do the job. In fact, that one would actually do the widening job. It's pretty good. So I'm just going to widen the top section so we don't stress the wood, and obviously I'm not going to go very far. That's it. And then we can just screw this in. We'll obviously give Pete back the original nut and the original string tree should he want to replace them. Okay, so I think we've done the whole of module 4, cleaned, oiled, everything before it, the fret leveling, you name it, done. New string tree, new nut and everything. So now we're going to pull out some D'Addario strings from the department of D'Addario. We're going to go with gold, red and black. Of course, just pull one of each colour out there. Gold, red and black. And then, what is it? Oh, I can tell. Green, purple and silver. Green, purple silver. These were donated to me by the good people at Guidaria, who very kindly got in touch with me a few months back and asked me if there's anything they could do for us. So I said, yes, please. We could really do with trying out some of these NYXL strings, and I do like them, and I would like to use them all the time. But when I'm going through these complementary strings, you get the benefit of these all within the same standard price of the setup. So what I'm just doing is I'm putting these through the back in the correct order. It's on the mat if you forget it, and it's on the little illuminated Guidaria light fitting, so you can't forget. So just pull them all the way through first, and then we'll attach them, fit them to the headstock tuners. I'm losing my power of speech tonight. This doesn't want to go through. Why is that? We've already got something in there. Come on. Thank you. So now we're into module or step 5. What we're really looking at now is putting the new strings on, stretching them out, and intonating them. And it's at this point I always want to stress the importance of the stretching, because one of the things that this setup is all about, amongst other things, it's clearly about leveling the frets while the neck is under load and is longitudinally compressed. That's a definite unique part of this setup. But what it's also about is getting perfect tuning stability. And tuning stability, a shock horror piece of information, is it doesn't have anything to do with your tuners. It has everything to do with, whoops, I better zoom out now. It has everything to do with your nut and the slack in your strings. So the tuners, basically, they work and they will not go backwards. They won't undo, they won't slip. It's a bit of a myth. The tuning stability, think of it as 50% your nut and 50% your strings. Now what I do on these split post tuners, I pull the string tight up to the tuner, count two tuners past, 2 tuners, and cut. Then I'll get my mechanical thing to help me. Then you place down in there, bend sideways into the gap, and start tightening and guide the string below. And you'll get a couple of winds on there, and then it will sit there on the nut. So we do the same with this one. The only difference is that's our stopping tuner. So two posts past there, and we'll cut. If you get that wrong, you'll cut the thing too short and you won't have enough to wind it on. And I've done it a few times. So the reason the nut is so important in the tuning stability is that the tiniest bit of friction in the nut will, cause the pressure either side of the nut to be different. So if it hangs up, the pull on one side is greater than the pull on the other side, but it hangs there in that imbalance because of the stickiness of the nut. What happens is that will then at some point release itself when you maybe bend a string or pull the strings in some way or other, and the imbalance of tension will equalize and your guitar will go out of tune, or that string will go out of tune as it equalizes. And this will happen, this will carry on forever if your nut slots are the wrong material or if they are not cut properly. So it's really important that the nut is the right material. I prefer and will always recommend Tusk. It seems to be great for tuning stability, very good for cutting too and shaping. That's why I recommend it. No, I'm not in league with them, I just use it all the time. And if it's been successful for me in my setups commercially, then I'm not going to change it in a hurry. I get it that some people love brass and some people love bone and some people love hardwoods and whatever. That's absolutely no problem. I go with what I can rely on for this tuning stability that I promise in my setup. So getting the material right, making sure that the nut slots are the right width and friction free, which sort of comes with the tusk. Making sure the first fret action is exactly right is all the work we have to do on the nut, which is why I spent so much time on it. After that, the next half of the equation is the slack in your strings. So we get them on, and the first thing I'm going to do is just lightly pull them like this. I'm holding them down at this end so they don't pull straight directly onto there. They pull against my fingers a bit first. I'm probably just making it up, but that's okay. So what I do is I go and tune this up to pitch. Now I've put them on, so I have to find my little tuning device. Okay, so that's tuned up. Just check we're still running. We're still running. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to physically stretch the strings between fingers and thumbs, pushing with the thumbs and pushing the other way with the fingers. And this really will wring out the slack in your strings, and we'll know it's doing that because it's going to detune them. And it's not detuning them because it's pulling the tuners backwards. The gearing will not go backwards. Or you need a massive force to stand any chance of turning those gears backwards. But what we're doing is we're taking stretch out of, or slack out of the string train wherever it's held, whether it's in the coils around the post or whether it's in the actual string itself. We're getting rid of that slack. And you'll hear that when we come to the tuning, it's out. So that I physically pulled out, that detuning, that amount of detuning would have worked its way out every time you pick the guitar up. But only a little tiny bit each time. Annoying you every single time because you play a guitar break or something, bending strings, hitting it hard, and then at the end of it, you'd be out of tune. And you've seen people had that happen probably many times. If you do this, if you get the nut right and you get the slack of the strings pulled out early or straight away once you fit the new strings, you will have tuning stability that none of your band members have. I promise you that. It's so worth doing. I mean, it's not to be crowing it over them. It's just to be able to go and play ready for the next song without having to retune. But if you learn this, I promise you'll lose your tolerance for band members who are out of tune. So what happens for me is if I finish a guitar and I go and take it out to play with other people, and I find that to my horror that after a song or two I'm out of tune, I know I've got something else to do. I know that I've either not stretched the strings properly or the nut still isn't right. And it may be that I've used an old one and I haven't fully, I may need to recut the slots or widen them or something, or it's got a bone one on that I don't normally use or something. But it will always tell me, because I know I can get it to where I want it to be. And if it isn't that way, then I need to go and finish the job. It's close. Okay, now the last thing we've got to do on the whole list of things in Module 5 is intonate the guitar. And to do this, we're going to use a tuner, electronic tuner. And the intonation is a complicated thing, but it's simple to check, thankfully. It's complicated to describe, and it takes a bit of a while to understand it, but it's not in and of itself supremely complicated. First of all, it's a matter of length. Each string on your electric guitar has to have a very slightly different length to the other to work with the given neck that we've got here. So that's why we have bridges with individual saddles that we can adjust. Unfortunately, on a guitar like this, the saddles are paired, the 3 pairs of joined saddles, so there's no difference. We can't set a difference between the E and the B. In other words, if the E intonates sharp, we have to move the saddle to correct it. We also have to move the B, and it may put that out. So we end up having to compromise when there are these pairs of saddles. But let's try the high E. So what we do is we tune it to the pinged harmonic, so it's dead on E, and then we fret it, so that's on. We do the B, and that's pretty on. Good. Tune the G. Tune the G to a G on the ping. Fret it. It's a little bit sharp, but it's settling down again to the G. Check the D. And the D's on. Check the A. Pretty good. That's good too. So that was well set. Now, I'm happy with that. The only one thing that I need to check on this is I think the position of the neck, the alignment of the neck is a tiny bit off. In that we've got, I don't know how we can see this, look through the mirror, we can see it. Yeah, a little bit too much room here, not enough there, and that's a position of the neck issue. So we will correct it by, and this is why I didn't do these up massively tight beforehand, we'll correct it by slacking off very gently, 3 of these, screws, and we'll leave the bottom one in place. And what I'll do, and maybe I'll see me do it, so I'll just gently allow it to settle where it will. It's just kind of, there's a little play in there that we can improve things with. Not a massive amount on this one, and I'm just noticing, having handled the neck now for a while, I'm noticing some, that's a bit better. I'm noticing some glue residue on the side of this. So let me just put this down here, and yeah, it's good because my grimy hands show it up, so now I can get some more of this finish cleaner. What's it called, everybody? Naphtha or Coleman's cooking fluid. I can get hold of that, and I can now run it down the edges here and get rid of those little tiny spots of glue from the tape, which is just causing the dust to catch on it. Okay, so that done. That's the end of the 5 steps of the setup. And if we turn it over and stand it up, we're done. And you can see how it's all looking here. We're probably just about to run out of power or something, but that's good too. So 5 stages. We sat down and played it and noticed what we could see, checked any damage, checked any dings, spotted what was wrong, what needed tweaking, checked the playability, the crackling of the pots, the slight scraping of this pot here, which is now fixed. Checked all of that, and then made sure all the electrics work, checked what the switching did, made sure it worked just nicely. So that was the step 0, if you like. And we got into the 5-step setup. We first set the action by doing the relief, which we took off the neck to do, made adjustments, put it back, tried it, adjusted it again. Relief was the first of 3 steps. Last fret action by reducing, if necessary, the bridge saddles, which you didn't have to do. By the time we flattened the neck out, that was pretty much spot on. A little bit on the low E. And then the third part of the action setup was to fit the new nut, and in doing so, set the first fret action on there. And once we've done that, that was the stage 1 done, or module 1 done. Module 2, we're ready to do the precision fret leveling. We marked all the frets in, kept the strings on at pitch. We marked all the frets beforehand with marker pen, and then we used the banana tool to fret level each track out so that under load the neck would be ready to play with the action we'd set. And we tested it as we went to make sure all the notes played and the bends played. Module number 3, step 3, was recrown the frets with a crowning file to change their shape back to where we wanted it, an arch shape. And then we sanded and polished after masking off the fretboard. Very boring, tiring job, but it polished the frets out to a nice playing condition that we see now. Module or step 4, small fixes. So we had a few lined up. We knew we wanted to clean the pots with contact cleaner. We also knew that we wanted to try and steam out some dings, which wasn't very successful. We knew we also wanted to fit the tusk string tree, which we did. And then onto module or step number 5, we fitted the new strings. Well, actually, we also did some cleaning after the fixing. So we cleaned up all the dust, got rid of all the any sticky residue, and then we also put lemon oil on the fingerboard. And then on into module step 5, we fitted new strings, stretched them out quite aggressively, and then checked and set the intonation. In this case, it didn't need setting, it was already set from before, which was great. So there we are. A bit long-winded in that I've talked my way over a lot of it, but that is the Reloved Guitars 5 steps to guitar heaven. But done in that way because I wanted to structure it according to this app I'm making. So hope you didn't mind, Pete, that I used your video as a kind of a guinea pig animal, a guinea pig for it. So thank you all for watching. Sorry about the occasional camera mess up or rubbish views. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.